Hello, everyone. I thought I would review Julius Caesar, both the play and one of the film versions, the 1970 version. Um, I've also seen the 1953 version, but I don't have a physical copy of that. I will also make some comments on that as well. And I actually think Julius Caesar is probably Shakespeare's most accessible play in my mind, especially if you know some of the history about Caesar, Antony, and Cleopatra, and so on. If you know some history, the play is fairly easy to follow. And because the play is caught up in physical intrigue, and in some ways is a very violent masculine play, it doesn't have some of the poetic complexity that other plays have, Shakespearean plays have. It still does have some great poetry. I mean, probably my favorite poetic line in the play is when Calpurnia says, and this is not the exact line, this is just a summation of it, that, you know, when beggars die, you know, the stars do not give a sign of it, but but the heavens will foretell the death of princes. And to me, that's probably the most poetic line in my mind in the play. That's probably my favorite line. So there is some good poetry in Julius Caesar, but it's far more focused on political intrigue, which, if you're a beginner, I think can make it a little easier to follow. So if you haven't read a Shakespeare play or you haven't seen a Shakespeare play, I would definitely recommend starting with Julius Caesar. That or Macbeth. Macbeth is also pretty straightforward and economical in terms of its overall pace. So either Julius Caesar or Macbeth. But now these aren't my favorite plays necessarily. My favorite Shakespeare play would probably be it would be a toss-up between Richard III, King Lear, or Hamlet. It would be probably one of those. Although Macbeth used to be my favorite play. It's fallen back a little, but it's still up there. Anyway, so no, but I think Julius Caesar is a very relevant play because it deals with things that are still going on in modern times. Because Caesar becomes, or almost becomes, a dictator, but he doesn't become it really solely because of force or power. He does it because he is quite popular among the people, and the people give him a lot of power, which kind of puts into question the whole idea of democracy. Because what use is democracy if the people can be easily manipulated? And also, just because the majority of people have an opinion on something, that doesn't mean that opinion is automatically the right one. I mean, throughout history, we've seen how the majority will use their power to oppress the minority. So that doesn't always work. But at the same time, you don't want all of the power in the hands of a single individual or a handful of individuals, because absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so it's a delicate balance. And I don't think we've ever completely figured out the right balance in society, because human beings are ultimately imperfect and flawed. And so the politics of Julius Caesar are very relevant, because the people in Julius Caesar are very fickle, and they could support one politician one day and the next day support a completely different one. But at the same time, is assassination the right answer? Is getting rid of your political opponents the right answer? Because if you do that, you could become just as bad as the people you're trying to fight. Because so many times people will point to someone else and say they're the dictator, but without actually looking inside without actually looking inside the darkness in their own heart. And so people need to be very careful not to moralize while also acknowledging the fact that authoritarianism is a real problem. But this is a very nuanced play, because it doesn't give you it doesn't give you straight answers. The play doesn't say absolutely that Brutus is wrong, but it doesn't say absolutely that Brutus is right. You're left to make up your own mind on the matter. And now I will get to talking about the film adaptation of of Julius Caesar from 1970. And now this is I like this version slightly more than the 1953 version, even though Jason Robards is not a very good Brutus. He's very lacking. He's monotone in many of his scenes, especially at the beginning. There's no passion in his voice. He does get a little better towards the end, but it seems to me the problem with Robards is that he's very monotone in the scenes where he's supposed to be subtle. But there's a difference between showing emotion in a subtle way and not showing any emotion at all. And in the scenes where he's supposed to be subtle, particularly with the scene with his wife, with Brutus's wife, he is terrible, especially in that scene. And so this movie would be so much better if Jason Robards were better. And he's a good actor, but even Charlton Heston himself said that he didn't like Robards' performance in this movie, that he said it was the worst performance by a great actor. And I think that sums it up, because Robart was a great actor, but he just wasn't bringing his A game to this. I don't know why exactly. But I do prefer Charlton Heston's Mark Antony over Brando's Mark Antony, mainly because, yes, Brando overall was a more versatile actor than Heston, but Mark Antony is a role that Heston was born to play. Heston is well suited for historical parts and Shakespearean parts. And I feel that Heston gives a nuance to Mark Antony, especially in his speech, where you can tell he's trying to manipulate the crowd. So sometimes he'll shout and then he'll speak in a lower register or a softer register, whereas Brando is angry throughout his speech. And you got to remember that Mark Antony is trying to manipulate the crowd by criticizing the conspirators, but he's not going to come out and say it directly. Well, Heston does a very good job of that. He does a good job at manipulating the crowd, because you're never quite sure where his allegiances lie. If you're a member in the crowd, we know, but if you were just watching him, you would think, well, where does his allegiances lie? Is it with the conspirators, or is it with Caesar? Whereas Brando, it's very clear where his allegiances lie. Again, there's no nuance in his performance. He's still a pretty good Mark Antony. I'm not saying that he isn't. There's a lot of passion in that speech. But overall, I think Mark Antony, I think Heston was a better Mark Antony. And I also really loved the cinematography in this. I thought the dream sequence where Calpurnia dreams of Caesar's death, I thought that was very well done. And this one's, I think, the 1970 version, I think, is overall just more cinematic than the 53 version, which feels more like a play. The only negative side is Brutus. This would be a perfect version if Jason Robards gave a better performance, but he just doesn't here, so that's what drags it down a little. But overall, that is my review of Julius Caesar the play and Julius Caesar the movie.